before we go into like your story, I would want to know about how things got started. Have you always been deeply rooted in your faith? Like, can you start off with telling us like a little bit about, you know, just your childhood and growing up?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So that's a great question, and I really appreciate you asking that question. I actually just made a post today about a little bit detailing my childhood, and it wasn't a good childhood. I will say that I survived a lot of traumas, mainly childhood sexual abuse, childhood sexual traumas within the family. And so being a survivor of that while having your parents divorce, and it wasn't a nice divorce, like police were involved, it was really ugly. And but I wasn't allowed to talk about it. And I don't know how it is for you, but being a Latina in our community, we don't talk about the things that we go through, because God forbid someone outside of the family knows our business, or God forbid someone looks down upon the family as if we were some mobsters or something. Like, we nobody. We are literally nobody. Who cares what people think about the family? And so I wasn't allowed to talk about it, or if no one ever overtly said that I couldn't talk about it, I felt as though I couldn't. I didn't feel like I had the space to express how I felt and express the things that were happening to me. So I went on being sexually abused for over 3 years, and it was someone that I lived with. It was someone that was a caretaker of mine. And you know, he was able to get away with it, and so he did, until I finally realized. I started when I was about like 6 until I was about 9. That exact age is a little murky, but it was that time period. And I realized that I could end this violence against me by being violent. The person that my abuser was my great grandfather, and so he was over what, 85 years older than me. And so it finally clicked that I'm like, number one, I'm stronger than him, and number two, I'm faster than him. So after about 3 years, I started using my body, like I started defending myself when he tried to molest me. And so I was able to end that. But as I grew up, you know, that was something that stayed in my body. That trauma stayed in my body. So I didn't trust people. I didn't love myself. I felt like my body was only useful in that purpose. And just growing up in a culture where, you know, we're stricken by poverty, there was a lot of girls that I grew up with that were already sexually active, a lot of boys that were very sexually active, even in middle school. There were girls that were already pregnant in middle school. And, you know, and I even experienced that, not in middle school, but the first time that I ever had sex, it was by rape, and I got pregnant. And so I mean, it was a very traumatizing, my upbringing was extremely traumatizing. And it's so sad, because if you look at pictures, I was on the dance team, I was in the modeling, I did acting, I was so involved in so many different things. But number one, it was because my mom wanted me to do it. So in a way, I was kind of like pleasing her. And number two, I mean, it was a great way to like kind of disconnect. And I recently realized that most of my life spent my time disassociating. And even to this day, this is something that I struggle with, or that I'm intentional with catching, because I don't even realize when I disassociate, because I just got so good at it. That's the only way that I was able to survive my childhood without mentally breaking, right? Into thousands of little pieces. And so, so truthfully, and you know, my abuser was also really big in the church, in the Catholic faith. He was a deacon. So I would pray and I'd be like, God, like, are you there? Are you real? Do you see what's happening to me? And as a little girl, like, I didn't really differentiate like between God and serving in the church and deacon. So I felt like my great grandfather was supposed to be a representation of God, yet he was sexually abusing me. And so there was a bit of a disconnect for me with like how I felt about God, and I didn't really feel like God had my back. I thought I was forgotten, and I didn't hate God for it. I hated myself for it. I felt like there was something that I did wrong, something that maybe God was so displeased with me that he just didn't feel like protecting me, that maybe he protected other little boys and girls, but not me. And that was basically the majority of my life. I had an encounter with Jesus at the age of 12, and I fell in love with Jesus, but I also fell in love with the church and God and the community. And I left that. Fast forward to about 17, I came back to Christ. I moved away from New York. I'm from New York, so if you guys don't know, I'm from New York. And I moved in with my father at the age of 17, and my dad was going to church, still goes to church, praise God for him, because he has been praying for me for years, him and my stepmother and the mentors that I left behind. And so I got involved with the church, and I got involved with God, and I accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, which was super. Let me tell you, coming from a Catholic background, I might as well said that I was a Satanist child. Like, it was bad, but I was really bold in my faith, really shut out of my faith, and that's kind of where, I guess I've been on this relationship, on this journey with God my entire life, because my entire life I've been seeking God, I've been seeking Christ, and it's been a long journey. So yeah. I stepped away for 8 years. From the age of 23, I was sex trafficked. So from the age of 23 to this year, January, I stepped away from faith. And earlier this year, there was something like an urge in me. I was not going through anything. Nothing was going on in my life. My life was perfect. So I thought, right? Like, it was beautiful. I was thriving in my personal life, in my inner world. And something was like, you have to read the word. If you think that you're wise and you're reading all these books, you have to read the book. That is the book that you're going to find the most wisdom in. And I was like, okay, I'll do it. And I even said a prayer to God. I was like, God, just because I'm going to read the Bible doesn't mean that I'm going to come back to you. So I know, no, when I think about it, I start crying, honestly, because how dare I? But God knew what he was doing, and he's the one that put that urge in me. I think like 2.5 weeks went by, 3 weeks, and I was like on my knees, like begging God for forgiveness, repenting, and accepting Jesus Christ back into my heart. And yeah, so it's been already like 5 months, and I feel like it is forever. So we'll see though. But I pray to God that he guides me for the rest of my life, and that I never, ever, ever choose anything over him.
Wow. Well, first, I must just say that you're such a light, because despite everything that's happened to you, I know we've been like in 10 minutes of this live, like you just, shared so much of, your tormented childhood, what you've had to go through, how that impacted you going into adulthood, or, as a teen, and then going into adulthood, and then constantly trying to find your way back to Christ as a child, loving him, and then kind of getting lost into adulthood, and then kind of finding him again. So like my next question is, when everything happened, you said you were sex trafficked at 23. Why did you, because you also mentioned you stopped going to church around that age as well. Was that because of that happened? Like, how did that transpire?
Yeah, so I would say that I was already kind of backsliding. I was already losing my faith a little bit, mainly because during that time, I feel like if you remember church and you remember what it felt like to be in church, like in 2013 to 15, it was very big, at least where I was, it was very big on evangelism. It was very big on the prophetic, which glory to God for the prophetic. And it was very big on spreading the gospel, got very close to the pastoral family. And I felt, I'm not saying there was an expectation there. There definitely was an expectation, but I also felt like that expectation that my leaders had over me was trumped my relationship with God. So while I was performing, while I was evangelizing, while I was moving in the supernatural and, doing all these, works and wonders, my relationship with the Holy Spirit, my relationship with Jesus was kind of taking a back burner. And so I got burnt out, and I no longer could fight sin. I could no longer fight temptation. Like, in order for us to fight temptation and fight our flesh, we need to be filled with the word. We cannot do this on our own strength.
Right.
Because if we do it on our own strength, then what's the point of Jesus? So,
Exactly.
anyway.
So you started doing it on your own strength.
No, and I failed miserably. And then during that time, I was doing an internship in Washington, D.C., so I was already separated from my church. I was already separated from, like, my community. I didn't have friends that were in the world. My only friends were my brothers and sisters in Christ. So when I got separated from that and I moved to D.C. and I did that internship in the summer, I was like, and it was Chocolate City, girl. I was like, what is this? This is what I've been missing out. And surely I was, but there was, I wasn't missing out on the world, but my eyes were definitely open because, like, I lived in Miami, so there was really only a certain kind of people that I was surrounded by. So I definitely am thankful that my eyes were opened up to other situations, but not in the way that was pleasing to God. And so I was backsliding already as it was, and then it was the perfect storm. I was struggling financially. I had 2 jobs. I was a full-time student. I didn't really have the support of my parents. It was a lot. It was a lot. I was fatigued. I was tired. I was tired of people expecting things from me, and I wasn't allowing God to fill my cup. And so the right person came at the right time and easily convinced me to leave the ways of God for good. Wow. So he thought.
And while it was happening, were you aware that you were being sex trafficked? Were you aware of, like, everything that was going on?
Perhaps. I mean, I knew the night that I moved in with the pimp, I cried. I cried. He came into the room and he's like, "Why are you crying?" And I'm like, "Well, because this is a blatant decision that I'm making to separate myself from God." Like, God, like, I felt like God and we were in, like, kind of couples therapy for, like, a few months. And then I finally decided to be like, I'm done with you. And it really was scary. But I felt like I was already in too deep. Like, I felt like, well, this is something that I'm going to write out and see what happens. But as far as being sex trafficked, I'm not sure if I was aware of it. I had never met a pimp before. I didn't know what it was. I thought that they all looked like Cat Williams. Like, I don't know. And he didn't look like that, So I wasn't really, due to the amount of trauma that I've had in my life, I think that I've done a really good job at pretending that something isn't what it actually is in order to function.
Wow. And how long were you in that state of your life for?
So I stayed with my pimp for only a few months, honestly, because something just didn't sit right about me having to give every single dollar that I had to this man. And it was hard for me to, like, it was just hard. But I stayed in the game after that. I stayed in the game until I was 27, until COVID happened. Until 2019, I stayed in the game. Yeah.
Really? Wow. Because I watched a YouTube, like, I think your latest YouTube video, but it's an old video that you posted back on YouTube.
Yeah. I should make a description. Like, I should add it in the description that this is, like, an old video. And the reason that video was already up from, like, years ago, but then I had to take it down because my thumbnail, it's me scratching my nose, but it shows, like, it appears that I'm showing the middle finger. So they removed the monetization on my video. So I was just like, let me just, like, fix the thumbnail and re-upload it. But I thought that people already knew that. And I don't know why. I feel like, honestly, I just feel like I have, like, the same people that know my story. I like, for some reason, I don't really grasp that new people are finding my channel every single day. And I need to just be more aware of that. So thank you for bringing that up. You're not the first person. So I'm going to heed to this feedback and
No, well, the video was very enticing. Like it was very like captivating because I also read the caption of how you mentioned about the life you used to live, but you mentioned that was like right before COVID, because you said it was titled "The Night That I Met the Person That Gave Me HIV," and you got a black eye, and I'm like, dang, this girl has been through it. But that was recent, like relatively recent.
Yeah, well, it's gonna be 5 years ago. It was,
Yeah.
5 years ago. So
Wow.
it seems recent, but like it seems also like lifetimes ago. But yeah, that was wild. That was definitely wild. It was a turning point that I was honestly begging God for.
Tell us, kind of going into now, about how everything transpired, because there's this stigma with people that have HIV, how they got it. People think that they're quote unquote dirty or promiscuous, or all these things associated with it. But I mean, like, look at you, like you like, so how did everything happen? How did that, because it's on YouTube, y'all need to follow her YouTube.
Follow me on YouTube. It's the same handle as my Instagram, and it's the same handle as my TikTok. So Bianca.Ordonez _. Okay, so first and foremost, I spoke about sex work, and I want to talk about sex work a little bit just before we get into all this other stuff. Because I'm not defending sex work, but I think that if we were to have a healthier conversation around sex work, less women would be sex trafficked. Less girls would be sex trafficked.
Yeah, exactly.
So it all starts protecting people starts with having a conversation about the situation. The same way with how I was sexually assaulted as a child. This is something that went on in my family. Baby, this was generational. I was not the first person in my family to get sexually assaulted by a family member. This has been something that's been going on for decades, since before I was even born, and no one ever talked about it. And that's why it persisted. That's why I'm so adamant about talking about everything that I go through, so it doesn't persist, not only in my life, but I have a child now. I want to make sure that it doesn't persist in her life. We have to shed light on the things that we're ashamed of. Otherwise, it's going to grow in the dark. That's all it is. And even if it goes in the dark, the moment that we turn on the light on it, you're going to realize that it's not as big of a monster as we thought it was. And so when it comes to sex work, I will say that in the 6 years that I was, or how many ever years that I was sex working, I never got anything. I never got any STD, nothing. I was never even afraid of it because it was a profession. Now, is it completely immoral? Absolutely. And is it full of wickedness? Absolutely. It's all the things that you definitely don't want to do. But I don't think that many women go into this saying that they want to do this. This is something that they feel like they were either forced to do by circumstance or forced to do because they were actually sex trafficked. And so another thing about sex trafficking is that people also have the misconception that in order to be sex trafficked, someone has to pull up on you in an unmarked vehicle and put you in a car and, take you across the border. Although that does happen, so please protect your children, ladies and gentlemen. That's not the only form of sex traffic. Sex traffic is coercion. Sex traffic is manipulation. Sex traffic is deceit. And that's how a lot of modern day pimps, get their girls, by acting like they're interested in them, by acting like they want to be their boyfriends, and also by having other girls sex traffic the actual girls. So it's very much, the game is not how it was like in the 80s and 70s. This is very much charismatic now. And so that's the first thing about sex trafficking. The second thing is that sex trafficking is also considered very dirty, just as much as when people are in my comments, that I don't really talk about getting sex trafficked. I don't really talk about being a former prostitute, because I know that the focus is not going to be on what actually happened and how we have to protect ourselves, but it's going to be on, she deserves this. And I don't think that anyone deserves, depends on how we're talking about it now, because if we're talking about from the standpoint of Christ and faith, we all deserve the worst things that have happened to us, because we have all fallen short from the glory of God. And it's only through God's grace that we find redemption, that we find inner healing, but I know that that's sometimes a little bit too deep for people. And so I say it gracefully, that like everything that has happened to me, maybe outside of like the stuff that happened to me as a child, but the Bible also says that the parents' sins will go on to their children.
Yeah,
Like the
yeah.
children will pay for it for up to 3 generations. So, not a sermon, but sex trafficking, I never got anything, and it was a job, a horrible job, a job that made me feel like a zombie inside, truthfully. But that's not the reason that I got HIV. Is it possible that women could get HIV sex working? Yeah, perhaps, but it's also, you have to see the risk. There's different levels of risk. Unfortunately, there's some women that are sex workers and also drug addicts. So they sex work in order to fund the drug addiction and things like that. So
Yeah.
it's in my personal experience, I felt relatively safe most of the time. There were some times that I felt very unsafe, but most of the time I felt relatively safe. Now, as far as getting HIV, it is true I was promiscuous. And by promiscuous doesn't mean that promiscuous just means that you're not really picky, you know. And if you were being picky, you would either be celibate or, you know, be waiting for your husband or only sleeping with your husband, right? So even if you go from relationship to relationship, I mean, that is in a way a sense of promiscuity. And so, but I was definitely a much more other side of the spectrum of being promiscuous, mainly because of all the things that I went through. So my body was extremely numb. I felt like as though my worth was attached to people men specifically showing interest in me. And that's basically how that happened. And I will say also that people get HIV from their spouses all the time. I did a women's group at my local clinic earlier this year, and most of the women, first of all, were past their midlife. They were like 70s, 70-year-old women. And number one, most of them hadn't told anyone, just the girls, the women in the group, and like other women that are HIV positive. And number two, they got it from their spouses, from their husbands. And so HIV can happen to anyone. The risk is higher when you have casual sex and engage in hookup culture, because people don't really take the necessary measures to protect themselves and to ask the right questions, because they don't feel like they can trust you. There's no kind of investment into this hookup. So why do I have to tell you my deepest, darkest secrets if you don't even care about me? Like, I don't have to tell you. Yeah. And that's the problem. You know, that's why one of the biggest things that I'm against now is hookup culture and casual sex, because there's nothing casual about it. It is so high risk.
Yeah. And so soul ties.
Yeah, girl. And let's not even. That's and soul ties. Yes. So, yeah. So I met the guy, and he knew he had HIV, and he didn't want to get on medication.
Wait,
so he knew.
I'm probably gonna ask you a lot of questions. So he knew he had HIV.
Mm-hmm.
How did you end up knowing or finding out that he had HIV? Like that he knew basically that he had it, because he didn't disclose it to you.
No, he never admitted it ever. Like to the day that I left him, I ended up being in a relationship with him. And so while I was going through the acute stage, where I literally felt like I was gonna, like, God was calling me to the gates of, I guess, hell at that time, because I was like literally living in so much weeks. And so the symptoms were horrible. I had fevers, I had cold sweats, I had rashes all over my body that didn't itch or anything, but they were little red dots all over my arms, all over all of my limbs, maybe in my back, but I couldn't tell. I couldn't hold anything down. I lost over 20 pounds in about 2.5 weeks. And I would, yeah. I went from weighing about, like, I want to say like 137 to 140 pounds to 117, 160 pounds. Yeah. And I was really, really sick. I would wake up And I'm like, okay, today is a good day. I went on Dr. Sebi's diet. I did a call with Queen Afua. If you know, you know. Like, I literally fasted, herbs, alkaline diet, like all the kind of like holistic pills that I could take. And nothing, literally nothing helped. I would wake up and I'm like, okay, today's a good day. I feel refreshed. I feel energized. And literally within like 3 or 4 hours of me starting my day, fever. And then right after that, like 20 minutes into my fever, cold sweats. So I would be burning up and then I would get super, super cold right away. And then I would get dizzy and then I would vomit. And this was just every single day. I went to the hospital 3 times to urgent care, but the urgent care was attached to the hospital. It was part of the hospital that in my community. And they sent me back home all 3 times. I got pregnancy tested. They tested me for, like, they did an STD panel, but just not HIV.
What? So HIV is like one of the main tests. Oh, I think they probably just tested you for gonorrhea and chlamydia.
Yeah.
Because I worked at the hospital, and when they come in, we just test them gonorrhea and chlamydia, and then we tell them everything else, the health department. We only test them for HIV if they're like severely ill, meningitis. Like, we think that they're like dying. Wow.
Yeah. Well, that's how I felt. I literally felt that way. I looked unwell. But I don't know if maybe I didn't. This is the thing. I think that maybe I didn't look like a person, because I still looked like myself and just much thinner and all these other things. So maybe they were just like, oh well, maybe I don't know what else to say, except that also I'm gonna be completely honest with you. I don't think that I would have had the recovery and the acceptance that I had so early on had I found out during that time, during the acute stage, which I also don't even think that I would have been able to find out during the acute stage. So even if they did test me for HIV, I'm not even sure if it would have showed up in my blood that I was HIV positive yet, because my acute stage started literally like 3 weeks after infection. So I don't think that, I'm not sure.
Did you know, sorry to interrupt, did you know, like, at what point, like when you guys engaged, oh, this was when he gave it to me? Did you, like, were you able to pinpoint that? Or?
No, I think that was the first time, because his viral load was so high. And yeah, like and
he was not getting treatment.
No.
Like, but if you have it, you're not going to tell others. Like, I mean, the least you can do is get yourself treated so you can be undetected, you know? Like, I'm floored.
Yeah, well, that's and that's why if you see my videos, you know that I don't have anything really negative to say about him, because he is what happens when you fear the stigma more than you fear, like, healing or the truth. Or I don't know his story. I don't know, like, everything that I knew about him was really a lie. Like, he didn't really tell me. There's few things that I feel like might be true, but even those things, I'm not even sure anymore if they are. So what I do know is that he also had his own set of traumas, and he lived a very long life in his short-lived years. And so I'll tell you this. When I was going through my acute stage, to answer the first question, he would ask me to come over, and I'm like, I cannot come over. Like, I don't know what's wrong with me. Like, I don't want to give you whatever I have. And his words were like, don't worry, you can't get me sick. Like, there's nothing that you can do that can get me sick. And I was just like, at first, like, I thought it was like kind of like sweet, but then I'm like, but you don't know that. But then now I'm like, you do know that, sir. You did know that. And so, and I say this with a smile on my face because I'm not going to cry about it. It is what it is. I feel like he got a one up on me, and he surely did. And, yeah, but so I also thank God that I didn't find out that I was HIV positive when I went to the hospital, because I would have never fallen in love with him. I would have never experienced, and by falling in love, something that I realized today was that I'm not sure if I loved him, but I loved so purely, more purely than I've ever loved anyone before him. And it felt like a love that only God knows what it's like, because the love that I had for him, like, it wasn't reciprocated. He didn't love me back, but I was honest. I had pure intentions. I wanted to see him well. I wanted to, I just wanted him to understand how much he is loved, so that maybe he can love himself back in return. And the only thing that the only thing that reminds me of that is God's love, a mirroring of God's love, because God loves us so much. And the only hope that he has is that one day he sees how much we love him. But he doesn't love us with the expectation that we're going to love him back. And that is just so crazy to me. Because if I were God, I would just force everyone to love me. You know, like, I'm giving you this love, you better love me back. But God doesn't make that demand. He leaves it up to us to be able to experience him and love him and choose to love him. And so those 6-7 months that I was in the darkest stages of my life, I felt the closest to God. And I would never want to trade that for the world. I mean, it was horrible how like narcissistic and psychopathic he was. But God protected me so much. God kept me so close to him that I really experienced God so beautifully during that time. And I wouldn't have if I would have found out that I was positive right then and there. I would have just been depressed. I probably would have started drinking more, smoking more. I probably would have been suicidal. I don't even know if I would be here if I would have found out at that moment instead of letting the progression of our relationship unfold.
Wow. Okay, because I remember that in the video you said that you know, you don't hate him, you know, you don't have any ill will towards him, and I was just thinking like, dang, she's better than me, because I would have snip like chow, whatever, like that's a lot. And I know you mentioned that, you know, it was God's love and being close to him that helped you through it, but how did you like take it in when they told you? Like, when did you find, or how did you find out?
Yeah.
And how did you handle it? Like no, like this can't be it. No, like what happened? Like, what was it like finding out?
Yeah. So basically, after you go through your acute stage, which is when you're most symptomatic, the acute stage is basically when your body is trying to like desperately fight off the infection, and it obviously loses the battle because the virus is just so intelligent. And so the acute state passed after about 3 weeks of me literally just begging God to call me home. I start feeling better, and like all of the more aggressive symptoms, no more. But they're very subtle symptoms that still persist. Number one being fatigue. I have so many videos because I was on the Snap and on the IG story, like, I'm so tired. I was always so tired. And I worked in nightlife, you know, I was working at a strip club. So I was like, maybe, but I'm like, can't be that. It can't be that because I'm still sleeping 8, 9, 10 hours. So I was extremely fatigued all the time. And then I basically had a persistent, never-ending yeast infection. And I would go on clindamycin like literally every other week. I used to get them in packs because there's a hood doctor right here, so I would never have to go to the doctor. I would just go to the hood doctor, and she was pushing that clindamycin, girl. I think it was like $15 for the clindamycin. And so I would be good for a couple of days and it would come back. The second thing is that it was painful to have intercourse. It was extremely painful. Like, it hurt so much. And I realized that like no one's telling me what's going on. I'm doing the things that I feel like I should be doing and nothing's working. I was monogamous to him the entire time. And so I was like, let me just go to the clinic. I don't have insurance, but the clinic can see me. And since it's down there, they can either give me a referral or do what they do. So I made the decision to go to the clinic. This was in August. So I met him in March, and by August, that's when I decided to go to the day before I went to the clinic. I knew in my spirit, I'm like, yo, my life is going to change.
This was
like something's going to happen. 2019. 2019. And I was like, my life is going to change. My life is not going to be the same after I come back from the clinic. And I went to the clinic, and girl, I got tested for HIV. I did a full panel the day before I met him. And this is how I know that like God's hand was in this. Like, there was spiritual warfare happening as I met this person, because I met him because I went on a date, and the date went awry. Like, it ended up in a very bad situation. I was actually supposed to go on that date the day before, but since I decided to get tested, the clinic was packed and it took longer than usual. So I wasn't going to make it to the restaurant in time. So he's like, let's just meet tomorrow. The following day, it just so happened that he was filming his podcast with his group of friends. And that's how I ran into him after I left my date. And so this was like ordained, because I wasn't even supposed to be there that day. Our date was scheduled the day before. But anyway, I go and I get tested, and I'm sure, like, if you've gotten tested and you've been in that, like, you've worked in that field, you already know that the only thing that they have rapid results for is your HIV exam.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how it is now. I don't know if there's maybe rapid results for like gonorrhea or syphilis or anything like that. Yeah. But from what I can remember, you get tested and you wait. They sit you down in the waiting room. Once your rapid results come back negative, they're like, okay, you can go. If there's anything that's up, we'll give you a call and you'll come in. Okay, cool. So I'm sitting down, nothing new here, just waiting for them to tell me that I can go home, and then they call my number. And I'm like, why are they calling my number? And they call my number, and I'm like, I start literally shaking, but I'm like, take a deep breath. Take a deep breath. You got this. I go inside the little room, and I remember there was a Haitian doctor who was, it seems like the lab person, and then like a social worker of sorts. And they were like, you're HIV positive. And I'm like, oh no, you tested for HIV. You tested positive for HIV. And then the reason that this is so is because, as you know, there's a lot of false positives. So if you test positive for HIV the first time, they have to send your blood into a lab to get confirmed. So a lot of people get confused. How many times do you have to test positive? Twice. You have to test positive twice to confirm that you actually have HIV. And so when I didn't really react. Like, I was in so much shock. I did not initially react to the news. I was like, oh, okay. I started like kind of breathing a little bit more labored. And they're like, but don't worry, we have to send your blood work in to make sure that you're actually HIV positive. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, this is why I was sick. There is no way that I don't have HIV. Like, I experienced literally near-death experiences every single day for 3 weeks. This has to be HIV. And so a part of me was a little bit relieved mixed with grief, really, that I finally found out what was killing my body. But at the same time, I was heartbroken at what was the reality of what was killing my body. And during that entire time, I never got mad at him. Like, I felt like my man, like, what's going to happen to him? Like, I got to protect him. Like, what's going to happen?
So
and they asked,
wow, sorry. I'm just like, you're over here thinking about him.
Yeah.
Not knowing that it's him that gave it to you.
Yeah. Well, I knew that it was him that gave it to me. I knew it was him, but there was like, so I will say that it was a narcissistic relationship. It was extremely like mentally mind games, like abusive. And so, it was very, narcissistic and psychopathic. So I can't say that it was the goodness of my heart. I'm not sure if that's because in my right mind, I would have never reacted that way. But I was trained by him. I was conditioned by him to see him as even higher than me, like have more value than I have value. And honestly, I'm not to give this person more attention that they deserve, but even listening to him speak for 5 minutes, you can really tell how.
Yeah, I did my research.
You can tell how it didn't turn off. It never turned off. What you saw there was exactly what I saw at home. And so, yeah, like, I felt like I was in like a military camp or something like that with him. And so I knew that he had given it to me, but the fear, like my fear was like, why would he, like, he's dying. Like, that's like, why, what's going on? Like, it was more so that, like, his career was taking off. He was invited to the White House. There were so many beautiful, positive things that were happening in his life. And I just couldn't believe that he would choose to, like, die over getting help. But then eventually when they told me that I had to get on medication right away, when they told me that I had to get on birth control right away, when they told me all these other things that were going on, I started crying, girl. And I cried for like 3 hours. I stayed in the clinic until they kicked me out because they closed. I didn't want to leave. Like, I felt like that. Like, I felt like it's not real. It's only real there. The moment that I step out of the clinic, it's real everywhere. Like, this is my new reality. So I didn't want to leave. I was like, they really had to escort me out of the building because I didn't want to leave.
Yeah. What kind of support did you get after? Like, did you tell your friends? Did you like find a therapist? Like, how did you mentally like go through that? I can't even imagine.
Yeah, no, it was yeah, me neither. But so I worked with a social worker very closely, the one that informed me that I was HIV positive. I was working with her, and they connected me with like a peer, what do you call that? A peer support, like basically another guy, someone else who was HIV positive, but he was male and homosexual, and I mean he is male and homosexual. So like I was going to him like, oh, like, have you been dating? Like, tell me more, like, you know. So I went to him, but there was obviously a disconnect just because, of course, he was a man and he was also gay. But the moment that I stepped out of the clinic, I called my best friend. I called her because she knew that I was going to the clinic. And she's like, hey, like, you know, how did it go? And I was like a hot mess. And she literally snapped me out of it. She's like, Bianca, you are okay. You are literally the same person that you were, which, by the way, I'm not, but I am, right? I'm not, but I am. And she's like, you're perfectly fine. You're safe. You're going to live a long life. You can have children. You can fall in love again. Changes nothing. This changes nothing. Snap out of it. You're acting ridiculous. Like, she literally was like, pulled me out of it, and there was no kind of kindness in that. And you had to be aggressive because I was literally just like spiraling. And so I'm so thankful that I had someone to call right away. Yeah. Like, I didn't even, like, I stepped outside of the building and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I'm out. Like, I had to, like, I literally had to. Otherwise I would have just stayed frozen for, I don't know how long. And she forced me to get on with my day, to be honest. But something that I want to say that I experienced, like, at that moment, and this is something that a lot of people experience. So if you're HIV positive and or you know someone that just got diagnosed with HIV, I need you guys to know that what ends up happening is that we lose. I lost my identity. Like,
I've heard
everything that I thought I was, all the accomplishments, all the traumas, all the everything that I was beautiful, that I was making money, that I was, all the things that I thought I was at that moment meant nothing. Because this, if you can see in my comments, in every TikTok video or YouTube video, people don't care. What they see is that I have HIV. And that was something that I realized, that this is now like a part of me, like the biggest part of me, which of course now it's Jesus, so it doesn't even matter. But at that time, that was hard to deal with, because I had like imposter syndrome everywhere that I went, because now it was actually really real, because I would just be hanging out with friends. Like, we would just like be, you know, hanging out in the car. I would just start crying because I would realize that they were HIV negative and I was HIV positive, and I'm living a lie because they don't know. So like, the person that they're seeing, like, I didn't feel like my true self unless I told the world, honestly.
Wow, that's a lot to deal with. And you know, just because I heard that having a whole new identity, as you mentioned, someone else I interviewed said the same thing. How did you learn to, for lack of a better word, like love yourself again, or find yourself after this?
Yeah.
Or within this new life?
Yeah. I had no choice. Okay, I'm going to give 3 recommendations, okay? Before I got diagnosed, God placed these books in my life for a reason. The first one, which was the most impactful one, I was really sick when I was reading this, A Return to Love by Marianne Williamson.
Return to Love?
A Return to Love.
Okay.
That book prepared me for my diagnosis. Like, I would not have accepted it, received it, moved on with it. So much so that the social worker that I was seeing, so much so that the therapist that I was seeing, they were like, you're in denial. Like, you shouldn't be taking it this well. And I'm like, I grieve constantly, but I constantly am aware that I'm okay. So I was able to, like, I had those moments of grief, but they didn't last all day. They lasted for some time. It was like 10 minutes at a time. And then afterwards, 5 minutes at a time. Then after that, 1 minute at a time. Then for a few seconds. And now I don't at all. I don't grieve it at all. And so I Returned to Love by Marianne Williamson, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. That one helped me stay grounded in the now. So even if there's something horrible happening, are you safe now? Is there anything that you need right now? The answer is usually you're safe and there's something that you need. So everything else that's happening around you is just happening around you and not within you. And then the third one was The Untethered Soul, which by Mark Singer. Those 3 books really helped prepare me for the journey that I was embarking on, because they allowed me to see that everything that's external is out of my control, and the only thing that I control is my inner world. And how did I learn to love myself? I literally had no choice. I had no choice. I knew that with this diagnosis, mind you, I've never met anyone that's HIV positive. I mean, now I have plenty of friends that are HIV positive. My community is very open and accepting, and it is a beautiful community. But prior to that, I didn't have anybody that was HIV positive in my life. And so I was like, I need to love myself fully and accept myself fully, because my acceptance cannot be dependent on someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And was it easier said than done? Yes. Just look at the viral video of me crying, circulating all over WorldStar and all over these other platforms. Yes, it's easier said than done, but I put myself out there. And I didn't care. I like, did it hurt me? Yes. It hurt my ego so much because I'm not used to rejection. And that's the truth. And then this guy that I'm giving a chance to, who was like, he was in my DMs for years. So I'm like,
the guy that infected you.
No, the guy that rejected me. There's a video circulating of me crying, telling saying that I told him and he blocked me, because he did block me. He blocked me after I told him. He's like, because we had kissed, and he's like, I can get HIV from kissing. I'm like, no, you can't. And he's like, when should I get tested? And I'm like, I mean, you should get tested. When was the last time you got tested? I mean, I think you should get tested immediately. And he's like, so that means that I have HIV? And I'm like, no, sir, you don't. Like, there's no chance that you can have HIV. And on top of that, thank you for saying that. You're loved and you're strong too. And so he was just freaking out about it because we kissed, and then he ended up blocking me. And he was telling me that he loved me. I knew this man for 10 days. And so, but I put myself out there. And after that, I was like, the right person is going to come, it's going to enter my life, and I'm going to be good, and I'm going to be loved, and I'm not going to take no nonsense. And I realized the blessing that having HIV is, because when it comes to someone who experiences that, as a woman, most times, men just want to sleep with you. And being in the position that I was in the field of work that I was in, either men wanted to use me for money or they wanted to use me for my body, right? And so, but not in reality, because to be honest, it's really hard to date someone that is a sex worker. It's really hard to have a serious relationship with someone that's a sex worker. In theory, it seems like it's going to be fun, but in reality, it's not what people think that it is. And that's the illusion of it. That's the fantasy of it. So to all the women that are in that field, not to sound like a red pillar or anything like that, but a man that actually loves you, a man that really wants to see the best version of you, is not going to really want you, sex working, shaking your butt in the club naked, or half naked or whatever it is. But yeah, so I decided that I was going to own up to it, because the last thing that he told me before he blocked me was like, oh, don't worry, I'm not going to tell anybody. And I'm like, oh, nah. There's just something that I really have a problem with, and that's people thinking that they have anything on me. Like, I do not want to be a slave to nothing. Like,
Right.
that's why I really don't commit crimes. Like there's just something that I'm like, if there's a secret, it needs to be out in the open, because like I'm gonna Eminem this situation. I'm gonna talk about my struggles, my things that are shameful, my problems before anybody else could try to rub that in my face or think that they're sharing some big old secret of mine, because no, I'm gonna share it first. And so that's kind of the approach that I take with my life, really, and that helped me. I mean, my man, let me say something about my man, okay? He is fine. Like, he is so fine. And, yeah, like, so, yeah.
I love how you just like speak positivity into yourself and just into your life, despite like the guy rejecting you, because I think a lot of things associated with STDs, when people get STDs, especially those that are not curable, is like, oh my gosh, nobody's gonna want me, I'm never gonna find love, I'm gonna be by myself the rest of my life, I'm never gonna have sex again, or no one's gonna want to like be intimate with me. What do you, first of all, how were you able to find love after this? Because you were definitely speaking it into existence.
I was.
But how did you find love? Because y'all, she has a man, she has a child now, she has it all. So you can't have it all. Listen, look at that ring. Yes.
You can't have it all, literally. I mean, I'm HIV positive and I'm happy, so you can have it all. So how did I find love again? I think that I was ready for it. I was finally ready for it, because before I wasn't ready for it. Before, I thought I wanted love, but I couldn't properly love anyone because I didn't love myself. I literally hated myself, and I was looking for someone to tell me that I am worthy of love in order to be able to reflect that love. So the people that I found myself dating were people that didn't love themselves either, because like attracts like,
Right.
And so when I was finally in the place to be able to accept the love that my beautiful soon-to-be husband was able to provide for me and give me, I was able to receive it. It wasn't easy, though. And we got together 2 weeks before COVID, and then we did COVID together. So I spent a lot of nights slamming the door behind me and going for a walk. Because this man is not he is not going to tolerate it. He's not going to entertain it. He's not going to fall for my manipulations. So I couldn't get the reactions that I wanted out of him. So I had to really sit with myself and be like, Bianca, this is a moment of transition. This is triggering something in you. It's time we heal this. And I mean, it's still a journey, but I think being honest with yourself is the first step. If you can't blame everything outside of you. I blamed everything outside of myself, and I was a victim for 27 years of my life. When I finally got HIV, I stopped being a victim, and I started taking accountability for every single thing. And that actually helped me reclaim my power, because I am co-conspirator and co-writer of everything that has ever happened to me. And so negative, and now moving forward positive, right? So now I'm co-writing with God, and it's even better.
That's so beautiful. What advice would you give to people that are struggling to find love or disclose to a partner that, oh, I have, HIV or an STD?
So if you are HIV positive, first of all, this is something that I'm working on, so please keep an eye out for this, because I have helped people disclose to their partners already in private. So, and there's been so far 100% success rate. And what I will say is that when you are disclosing to a partner, you cannot expect that partner to appreciate it, honor it, and accept you for it. You're disclosing because you want to. You're disclosing because you feel like you need to. You're disclosing because it is an honorable thing for you to do, because it's aligning with your values and who you are as a person. Don't disclose for any other reason, because if you're disclosing in order for someone to accept you, you're not whole. You're still not whole. You're still waiting for someone to act to affirm you. And that's just not, when it comes to this, you have to know that you are whole going into this situation, and you're whole getting out of this situation. So I would say that you work on yourself first and foremost, and you will be led to share the most intimate parts of yourself, because that is what gives you power.
Wow. Wow. And if you don't mind sharing, how did your partner like take it? Like, how did you guys get to where you are now? Like, even just, you know, sharing that with him, and now you have a beautiful baby girl. Like that's just wonderful, amazing. So how did you get to that point?
Well, he's actually texting me right now, asking me how did it go. But how did I tell him? I told him the first day that we chilled outside. I met him at the club. My man has his own story. Like, he's HIV negative, but he has his own story. And, you know, I was working at the strip club, and, you know, you don't fall in love with strippers, they say, right? You don't fall in love in the club. But he fell in love. And the first time that we chilled outside at the club, I was like, I had to tell him because things were just getting really heated, you know? And so I really had to just be open, because I saw a future with him. And I was undetectable. So, like, for real, like, if we were just going to hook up, would I have told him? I'm not sure. And that's just me being honest, because I pose no risk to him. But I was like, I really want this man in my life. Like, there's something about him that I just see my life in him. And so we're with him at the very least. And so I told him it was hard, you know, I still wasn't saved. So I had to really get myself in the right state of mind to share that. And he said, he's like, give me a second. He opened up his phone, went on Google, started looking up the terms that I shared with him, like undetectable, basically what undetectable meant. He only looked that up, and he like started reading some articles, and then the rest was history. So yeah. But I think a big part of it was really that he didn't think that I was like thirsty. Like, he knew that I liked him. He knew that I thought he was so fine. But when it came down to it, like, I was like, you're not going to play with me. So, like, I was ready to leave him at a moment's notice in the beginning if there were any red flags. And I made that very clear from the beginning. So there was no way that he could be like, oh, that he's going to play with her. Not like, you're done. And I don't care. Like, if you're not the one, then there's going to be another one that's actually going to value me and that's going to love me and respect me, if you're not going to be the one to respect me and to honor me. And so I made that very clear from the very, very beginning. And it was hard.
And
it was hard. I didn't want to. Fake it. Even if you don't want to, like, I sound like I'm like a big boss or something, but I was like trembling inside, because I'm like, I really hope that he doesn't leave me. I really hope that he proves to be the man that I want him to be. And yes, he did, but I really had to make him prove himself.
But and that Bianca is so different from the Bianca that was, you know, prior to HIV, or even being with the other guy. Like, that's so crazy how, like, now you just, when you know your worth, you know what you're willing to accept or not, like, no matter what, like, you're standing on your ground, like, you know your value and what you bring. Yes. Yes. I love it. I wish we could, like, be on live longer, but because you just have, like, you're captivating. Like, I was just so tuned in. Like, I was tuned into your YouTube videos too.
Well, you're a great interviewer. You be asking all the right questions. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, okay. Just to close it off, I just want to give, you know, some people a chance to ask you any questions, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, I'm totally okay with that.
Any of the viewers, you guys, if you have any questions for Bianca, she has a remarkable story. Oh, someone said you should create a nonprofit.
That's crazy. So that's in my heart for sure. I really want to. It is in my heart. The reason being is that, it's making its round on TikTok. The reason that I want to create a nonprofit is because, listen, when I got diagnosed, one of the first things that I did was go on YouTube. And I'm like looking up people that are sharing their stories about being HIV positive, or like resources for people that are HIV positive. And the one thing that I seem to find a ton of is that there's a ton of resources for the gay community regarding men that are gay that are HIV positive. And cool, that's incredible, but I am not in that community. Like, my community, like, nobody talks about it. No one talks about being HIV positive. No one talks about support groups for HIV positive. And the stigma is very much alive. So like the one person that now it's a little bit different because more people are talking about it. But during that time, I only found one girl, and she was a white woman. So again, and she's a long-term survivor of HIV. Like, she's been living with it her entire life. So it's also a slightly different story. And there's ways that people can look at that differently than someone that acquires it from being, having sex through sexual contact, right? And so I felt like there was definitely a gap, like, to fill.
Yeah.
And that's why I do want to create a nonprofit, so that there can be a space for women. And hopefully at some point there's a leg for men as well, because there are a lot of men that are heterosexual that get HIV from women. But people don't like to talk about it because they think that it's only a gay disease, and it's not. Women can transmit HIV to men. It's not that it's less likely. The likelihood is the same, but it's just a little bit due to less openings in
man.
Like, it takes more than one time for a man to, usually, right? Unless the woman's bleeding, unless there's lesions. So like, they can easily get it one time, but with men, like, all they have to do is, ejaculate in you, and that's it, it's done. With women, there has to be blood present, there has to be an opening present in order for the virus to actually go into transmit vaginal to that form. It's in the works. I'm speaking to people about it because we need a space for ourselves. And I know of women that are living,
especially a woman of color. Like, women of color are so disproportionately affected. I think women of color, like Black and Latino women, or Latinx. Yeah.
Well, statistically speaking, it is true. So like, it's almost like double than that of white women.
Yeah.
And it's not to pit people against each other, but it's honestly just lack of resources. It's cultural, it's socioeconomical. There's a lot of things at play here. And so we need that space for ourselves, and we just need to support one another to show that we are supportive of one another. I think it's really important to demonstrate that. So
wow. You getting a lot of praise in the chat, and
so
this was amazing. I just can't thank you enough. Like, you're so positive. You're so, like, such a beautiful light. I mean, I could just praise you all day, every day.
No,
this was such an amazing
that's all God.
life.
Like I said, it's all God.
Yeah, I can see His love shining through you. So definitely. And I just want to, just thank you for, working to break the stigma, living in your truth, being a light to others, not letting this ruin you or lead you down a worse path. Despite the wrong someone did you just turned it around and made right in your life, which is just also commendable. So, I mean, thank you so much. And you guys make sure to follow Bianca, stay connected with her. I hope that we can work together again in the future. I thank you so much.
No, thank you for having me.
What is one last takeaway that you want to share with everyone? One last thing you want everyone to know that's tuned in.
Okay, well, that's easy. Trust God. Trust God with your life. You think sometimes two things. Number one is to trust God with your journey, trust God with your process. God's redirection is always a blessing. You do not know more than God. You do not know the ending. So just trust, right? And by trusting, it doesn't mean that you stay in the same sin that you're in. Okay, when you trust God, you're surrendering to God, and you're changing behavior so that it aligns with God. And so sometimes the behavior that we're changing, we don't want to, right? Because we're used to it, where we get conformed in our sin. If you're around poop all day, it's gonna stop smelling like poop and start smelling like roses. You feel me? So, trust God. And number two, be single. Being single is such a blessing. I experienced that for the shortest period of time between the guy that infected me and my now fiance. Like, that felt so weird. Like, he's my husband. But anyway, okay. Be single and truly single. Not entertaining anybody, not talking to nobody, not no sneaky links, no nothing. Just tune the world out and just be yours. Like, belong to yourself. As women, people say that, like, oh, I don't dress for men, I dress for myself. Literally everything that we do is for men. I mean, that was one of the curses that happened once Adam and Eve sinned. You know, like, God said that you are going to literally live for your man. Like, this is going to be like, it's going to be hard to just do things for yourself without the attention and wanting the attention and gaze and the affirmation of a man. So if you are single, like, optimize that, leverage your singleness, because that is what led me to my husband. That is what led me to my child. Me really leveraging my singleness and really figuring out who I am as a woman and tuning out all the other nonsense. So number one, choose God, obey God. Number two, appreciate your singlehood. This is a time, like, this is it's not for anything. It's not. It serves a purpose. It serves a purpose, and it can literally change the rest of your life if you know how to be single and truly be single. So those are 2 things. I know you said one, but I got you.
Amen. Thank you so much. This was awesome. Thank you. We're also grateful for it. I hope you have a wonderful night. Thank you, guys. Tune in for our next one, and don't forget to connect with Bianca. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful night.
You too, love.
All right.
God bless.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.